Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. This is actually a topic that is one of those topics that I've really wanted to make the best preparation for it, but my sister had her baby yesterday, and I wanted to work on it yesterday, but then I got into finding myself in the labor and delivery room, and alhamdulillah, everything went well. She actually had her baby, so I couldn't really do all the preparation as I had hoped that I would be able to do. But I'm going to lay out, inshallah, the different things when we're talking about living Muslim in Western University. As a chaplain, I've been a chaplain here at St. Catherine University for 2 years. I've seen a lot of different changes in how the development, or let me say, how the girls start out at the university in the beginning, with their hijab, with their full Islam. They're practicing, they're coming there. We've got a little prayer space in St. Kate's. It's like a little place where the sisters can actually pray in, and then by the year that they're seniors, you could see that they either left Islam or they're probably, still wishy-washy about what their identity is. And I was able to see a lot of different changes, a lot of reasons that I correlated to what really happened. What is the problem? Where is where is where's the problem? Is it with the Muslim community, or is it the system itself that necessarily just lets those girls fall in the cracks? So there are a number of different hopes and realities that the students, when they first enter the university, that they would have. So they would hope to get a degree, impress their parents or impress themselves, and of course be a proud Muslim. That's the hope that they come in with. But then they come and face a different reality that kind of absorbs them in, and where they fall in many cracks trying to obtain a degree. And yes, high school and school, that is elementary and middle school, is a lot easier than university, because university, it's, you're talking about the professors, in where you're being prepared in order to be a person that is probably taking care of people's lives, or probably being in a position where you could actually get a job. And of course, the university, based on the number of people that are graduating, based on the number of people that did find jobs, is what actually makes that university, that marketing and publicizing itself. So it will actually follow you to see how many students actually got a job, how many students actually maintained the job within the degree that they actually took, how many students completed 4 years, etc. So they will do all these statistics to actually see what really happened. And of course, in order to make sure that the students are at the level that will market the university's name, they will try as much as they can to make sure that the curriculum does make students excel within that field, in order to get the best jobs, to get the best at least in a secular community, to get the best, let's say, positions, and the things that will actually make your life successful. So you will actually find that the university life is indeed needing a lot of studying. So you will be pressured, and falling in many cracks to obtain a degree is very common. And of course, what my topic is really about is the part where many Muslims will be torn between studying and maintaining the identity. Studying is going to be definitely very challenging, and to maintain the identity itself is also another challenging thing. So it's like you're trying to fill your mind, you're trying to educate your mind, but at the same time, you're trying to maintain another piece of your mind, which is your identity as a Muslim. And of course, the challenge is, well, you try to find support within the Muslim community on campus, but you discover that the challenges are not only the Muslims, not only the non Muslims that are whether it's the faculty, or even the environment in general on campus. But you will even find that even Muslims themselves are actually becoming a challenge. They start absorbing you into another type of lifestyle. So it really becomes very challenging for many. But in order for us to understand how we want to, as Muslims, be able to maintain our identity as Muslims on campus, I think there are a number of different things that we have to work on. First of all, we have to understand the system. If you don't understand the system, you're going to find yourself within the system, and you're going to find yourself more of a subject in the system than actually an active one that is sorry about that, that is aware of where they're heading and what they're they become like a chess stone in where someone is moving you, and you're not aware of where and who is moving you or what is moving you. So, sorry about that. If you can mute everyone else, please. So, when we're looking at understanding the system, it's really important, because if you don't understand the system, you will be part of the system without you realizing. And if what we find is that many students, because they're actually not understanding the system, they're actually facing the different identity challenges. So part of understanding the system is that we understand that it is actually a secular slash an atheist system in its foundation. So what do we mean by that? In its understanding of the world, and it's an understanding of the purpose of life, and its understanding of ethics. This is really important to understand, is that and its understanding of the foundation of life, it is actually an atheist system. Even in the education system, it is actually an atheist system. So don't think of secular to just mean separation between church and state, to mean on the pragmatic, or to mean on the managing on a political level. No, it actually acts as the basis, the philosophy, the lens, if you have the lens that you see through the world, the lens that you decide, and that determines on how we want to design the educational system, the political system, the system in whether it's the judicial system, or whether the system in where we entertain ourselves in. So all that is actually the other part is the postmodern system, in where what that means. When you're looking at a postmodern system, you're talking about a system in where it stands on relativism, that there's no truth, but there's only one truth, that there is no truth. And that when we're talking about postmodernism, you're actually talking about a way to bring about truth by putting a narrative instead of an argument, a way in where, instead of considering ethics, to more consider your own individualism, that your own individual, your own ego feelings about how you want to define ethics, and so forth. So when we're looking at that, we're talking about liberalism, which actually is really a totally different philosophy in all the different details of it. Now, here's the part where, yes, these are the main points, but we'll go in details on some things. If the Muslim student doesn't understand what the system is really based on, then they're going to find themselves as part of the system and think that this is the truth, and don't understand that where is this argument coming from. And it's really sad to also mention that Muslims are more focusing on studying secular education than actually studying Islam. So we would have Muslim students, which we would actually hope they're, after graduating, postgraduate, after graduating with their PhDs, Muslim students that will later be the pioneers to actually lead the Muslim Ummah into, maintaining their Islamic identity, and at the same time using or benefiting from the secular education that they had gotten, whether that's in psychology, or whether that's in English literature, whatever it is. But unfortunately, you find that a lot of even those postgraduates have actually absorbed more of a secular slash postmodern slash atheist education and or indoctrination, to better put it, than actually the Muslim identity. So they will end up, this is the sad fact that we actually have to admit, that if the person does not actually carry the Muslim education, then they had carried more of a secular education and more the postmodern, these different indoctrinations than actually a Muslim identity. So having that being said, that's actually making them more prone to absorbing secular education indoctrination than actually Islam itself. Now the other part is that when we're, sorry about that, I'm just here we go, when we're looking at, let's do this. Sorry about that, everyone. I disabled a lot of different features that you guys actually had. Sorry about that. I hope I'm not being here. What is the word that I could use? A bully, I guess. Now, what we're actually finding within campus is really the result that you have more non-Muslim identity than actually a Muslim awareness about the Muslim identity. And of course, it all starts with knowledge in our modern times and what actually is happening, what is being promoted in the philosophies that surround us in the area, what is making the environment, that is surrounding us. This is really distracting. So the host, please, pretty please, if you may mute everyone. I cannot continue if I keep getting somebody distracting me. When we're speaking about the knowledge, why is it whenever we're talking about any challenge, we actually have to start with knowledge? Because remember, before you start speaking about somebody's behavior, you have to speak about their aqidah. You have to speak about their aqidah, because if you don't speak about their aqidah, then okay, this is very distracting. I can't handle this.
I'm trying to make you the host so that you can mute us, because if I mute everybody, it'll mute you as well. So I'm gonna give
Okay,
you the
go ahead.
option,
Okay,
and then you can.
okay. Okay, here we go. Now, why do we actually start with knowledge? Because, like I said, before you even talk about human behavior, you have to talk about what acts as the lens that generates that human behavior. So before we speak about the human behavior, and this is really common, that whenever we look at the different Islamic centers, we look at different, even our parents, etc., they would more talk about the human behavior than actually talk about what is really generating that human behavior. So they would talk about, for example, they would say, oh, boyfriend is haram. They would talk about don't do drugs. They would talk about why it's haram to do certain things, for example. And then many of the students on campus, Muslim students, they're really just looking at the behavior. And of course, the behavior, if there's no knowledge to back up where and why this behavior is acceptable or not acceptable, they will find themselves really an easy target to the gravity of pleasure, to the gravity of the entertainment. That is definitely, as human beings, we have an animal side of us in where it is attracted to what makes life, whether that's reproduction, that's food, that's water, entertainment, etc., all these different things. So they find themselves an easy target simply because they don't understand where the practices that surround them are really coming from. And this is really important to actually start in teaching aqidah. I always say postmodernism is actually the modern idolatry. So in order to speak about modern idolatry or to speak about Islam, you actually have to speak about what is opposing Islam in our modern times. Remember remember the Prophet ﷺ, when he was talking about Islam during his times, he was speaking about, when he was in Mecca, he was speaking about idolatry, but when he was in Medina, he was talking about idolatry and Judaism and of course Christianity. Well, that was because the environment was actually speaking of that. He wasn't talking about Hinduism, certainly, and not shamanism, and the list goes on and on. But based on the foundation of realizing and being able to distinguish between truth and falsehood, that's how you're going to build the foundation of understanding your identity and building an identity that actually is based on haqq. So let me start with knowledge, which is, understanding the Muslim identity and what surrounds the Muslim identity. What surrounds the Muslim identity right now on campuses is really, number one, relativism, in where there's no really definition to truth, and truth is just a relative thing. And of course, the second part is individualism. Everything goes back to the individual, and you will realize a lot of rhetoric that the Muslims are actually using, they're absorbing and not realizing where that rhetoric is actually coming from. Pragmatism is also another thing. Existentialism is also another thing. But all actually come from the main idea, from the main understanding of the world, which is really atheism. What is atheism? Well, it simply considers this world as matter in motion. There's no subjective morality, and therefore it's just that, one, there's no real truth to this world. In other words, there's no purpose, and that you as an individual act as the place to what you consider as truth. And of course, in the end, if it makes you feel good, well, that's enough for you to just act upon it, as long as you don't harm others. And of course, in the end is that, well, you design your benefit, and regardless of how different things may oppose your understanding of ethics. And of course, in the end, well, there is no purpose to life, and the purpose is really just you creating your own definition, your own purpose, and that there's actually no purpose that preceded. In other words, it's basically that essence did not precede existence, but existence preceded essence. So when we look at that, we would see and understand a lot of the different rhetoric, that we're talking about, whether that you would find in literature, you would find in psychology, you would find in so many different fields, and even the Muslim students not realizing where that philosophy comes from. It acts as, I would say, that lifestyle that they would absorb, and then it becomes the new identity that they would think, well, this is actually not related to the deen, and it's not against the deen, it's not against my identity, it's not against my Islam, but in reality it actually stems from it. So the different philosophies that infiltrated Muslim minds, whether it's relativism or when we're talking about individualism, you're looking at it's more than just an individual, going back to the individual, because it also acts as that philosophy that affects your understanding of your social relations. And of course, it emphasizes on the individual is more worth. So that's why the focus is, well, how do you feel about it? And you will see that those ideas in where not necessarily focused on the social relations, or not necessarily focused on, for example, family or ethics, or what ethics actually mean, etc. And then, of course, in the end, there's always this part in where you create your own purpose. It's you that matters. It's you that actually decides. It's all about you. How do you feel about it? And not necessarily what is the truth and what is the purpose that you're heading to. And of course, when we're looking at those philosophies, and I would say the basis of those philosophies, you will see a lot of them are actually in in, I would say, rooted, deeply rooted in the system. And of course, you have to keep in mind that secularism is actually the Sharia or slash legislature of atheism. So, in other words, the system that surrounds you, whether that's the education system, the social system, or even the entertaining system is really all based on legislature. So that legislature of atheism. So what decides the lifestyle that surrounds you? In other words, what is deciding whether something is right or wrong is not necessarily based on evidence as much as it is actually based on the vision of atheism. And from there, you could see all the different tunes of the definitions of ethics and what makes something right and wrong, and all these different things are actually vocalizing what the vision of atheism really is. So when we're looking at those different areas, you have to keep in mind that schools, universities, public media, public libraries, the public lifestyle that is surrounding you is really indoctrinated by so-called education and freedom of speech. Just when you thought that that was actually all based on education, now think again. Now let's look at some of these parts in where, of course, individualism is all considered. It's all the truth is considered based on one's personal interest without the interest of any paradigm, and of course does not necessarily follow one philosophy and may create an amalgamation of elements from different philosophies based on personal interest. And in other words, if you find it beneficial to yourself, just go for it. And of course, you will see that those philosophies are a lot of times influenced by different philosophies, whether that's hedonism, in where just look at the pleasure, just consider it doesn't have to have any intrinsic good, and pain is the only intrinsic evil that you should be concerned about. And I would get a lot of phone calls that would come to my office, even in where the girls many times are actually confused, in where my parents want me to practice a certain thing, but I'm feeling that this is better for me. And it could actually have a clear, let me say at least, a clear, what should I say? It's clearly not good, or even it's clearly harmful. Using the Islamic lens, it's clearly harmful on her deen, clearly harmful on her life, clearly harmful on her education, etc. But then she will say, "Well, I just want to live myself. I want to feel that I'm representing myself, and etc. Whatever that means," and finds herself really living a slogan than actually really living the purpose and understanding the purpose that preceded life. And again, it's essence that preceded life, and not life and then creating an essence for it. And that's exactly what many times we would find at universities and university campuses is, trying to explore human existence, and of course trying to say and consider that, oh, I'm feeling that this is what I should be doing. And it considers, of course, that world is nothing but absurd, meaningless, and we have to create the meaning for it. And this is very often that I would get students coming to me and saying, well, I want to create my own meaning, I want to create my own feeling, I want to feel that I'm making a difference. And then she doesn't realize that, what do you mean by making a difference? What kind of a difference are you trying to make? And many times, although it sounds very beautiful, hey, why are you against people creating a difference? Why are you against people being leaders? But it's actually, when you look deeply in it, many times it's nothing but a slogan that is really empty of the essence that it should really stand on, the essence of the purpose that preceded life, and not the other way around. Most of the times it's actually talking about an essence that was created. So she will say, well, I found myself, becoming a beautiful or whatever skater, or an actor, or a fashion designer. I'm not saying fashion designers are all necessarily doing the wrong thing, but many times not realizing where this slogan, this rhetoric is actually coming from. All the other paradigms of ethics to this, when we're looking at all other paradigms of ethics to this philosophy are actually remote, and because this philosophy considers that all other philosophies, all religions are more of a human experience, not anything else. And of course, when we're looking at this philosophy, it's really important to understand that not only existentialism, individualism, or relativism, but we're looking at all many other philosophies that I have not mentioned here due to time. They actually have an impact, and a great impact on different fields of education, whether we're talking about psychology, anthropology, sociology, liberal arts, and of course, when you're looking at those in even humanities, and even especially in, let me call it the humanities department, in where a lot of how to interpret life and how to interpret human behavior is involved, is a lot of it really based on a specific understanding of life. And that is atheism. That is atheism, because of course atheism actually regards that everything is based on absurdity. There's no meaning to this world other than the meaning that we actually give it, and many things that surround us in contemporary world are really based on such philosophy, and that creating a meaning to success, even if it's virtual, and even if that is virtual and not real, and in the end just create an expression to yourself, even if it expresses absurdity. So you would see the girls, or many times in where they're trying to express themselves, and usually what are you trying to express yourself in? So she's a hijabi, but she's all tattoos, or all, what is that called, piercing, and then you're like, okay, so what's going on right here? And what it really is, oh, I'm trying to express myself. So is piercing necessarily a way of expression? So how is piercing necessarily a way of expression? Well, in our modern times, it's really just to express absurdity. It's just to, and of course they become really convinced that no, it's to express beauty, not realizing that you go through all the pain, certainly, but then it's really coming from this whole bucket of trying to express absurdity than actually express essence. And of course, creating a meaning to success, even if it's virtual and not real, is very common, and going against tradition and religion to express power. And this is very common. So you will see this very many times happening on campuses, in where going against what is common is a way to show that you're strong, a way to show that you are capable of doing it. And of course, you will find a lot of people on campus that are what should I say, clapping and cheerleading you for, yes, you managed to go out against the common practice, the common tradition, even if that common tradition, common practice was actually found in nature. So you're actually encouraged to go against everything that is traditional, even if that was found in nature, against everything that is traditional, whether it's your family, whether it's deen, whether it's religion, whatever it is, just go against it in order to prove that you were capable of being strong. And of course, all that is really based on relativism, in where it considered that there's no truth but one truth, there's no truth, whatever all this confusion actually means, in where it actually goes into in itself a whole set of refuting itself. In fact, moral relativism regards that there's no religion or area of truth, and it's all in the eyes of those that see it, since there's no epistemic truth. And of course, truth is relative, and of course, even though it contradicts itself, but it still stands, and many people actually take it without them realizing it. It's all when, for example, you're sitting in a group, and most of the times, if you would say, well, Islam says such and such, somebody would say, well, I think, and then each one wants to present, well, not only Are we here talking about even, the Muslim students actually speaking about, well, I think very, very oftentimes we're starting to see the new type of so-called progressive Islam, in where each one is trying to present in their own understanding of what they want or what they think Islam says. Now we're getting into a new type of relativism, that where even when we're talking about scripture, even when we're talking about religion itself, is right now with relativism within the Muslim students that have absorbed relativism. You're actually finding this stream of new Muslims. Well, I'm not going to do right now, at least, division, whether how much of it is Islam or not. So I'm just going to use Muslims to mean those that identify as Muslim, at least. You're going to find a lot of Muslims where they would make their own interpretation and say, well, you can't impose your thought on me. You can't be judgmental. Not realizing that the word "you can't be judgmental" is not necessarily a Muslim word, because in Islam, al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, ordering for what is right and ordering for what is wrong, based on a paradigm and based on the standard of Islam, is actually what Islam calls for. In other words, Islam is all based on identify truth from falsehood. But to ask the person, or even a Muslim, and say, well, don't be judgmental, is actually coming from a philosophy of relativism, in where it regarded that to actually say and consider one specific paradigm or one specific standard as the truth is somehow imposing your own personal thought, or imposing or trying to refer or consider that there is actually a specific standard or specific meaning to truth. And of course, in the age of relativism, that in itself is a form of terror. And many Muslims are actually absorbing this thought and not realizing this point. Now, knowing the basis of such philosophies and other philosophies is actually the start of realizing the world around you. So here's the thing. Before you actually go into any system, you first have to, in order to create, let me say, in order to create the shield to protect you from all the different targets that are in this system, you have to know what those targets are looking like. Well, in order to protect yourself, you have to know what type of danger you need to protect yourself against, and you have to know where it's coming from. And that's why when we're looking at the basis of that, we're seeing that there are actually a number of different philosophies and schools and trends that actually branch out from these philosophies. Feminism is on the top of the list. Yes, feminism. Although, yes, it sounds very attractive to say empower women and in strengthening and women rule and all these different rhetorics, many times they don't really realize that feminism is actually coming from I would say, from the bucket, from the source of atheism, postmodernism, relativism, existentialism, individualism, neo-Marxism, and the list goes on, which really goes back to atheism. But here's the thing, is that when we see even da'iyas or Islamic institutions, or at least those that we would really hope that they would have the power, we could see the sisters that are, mashallah, active sisters, etc., and wearing a hijab, etc., and not realizing that feminism actually comes from that certain bucket, and they would actually fall for the rhetoric, the catchy rhetoric, which sounds very much into a narrative in it, where it's all about women rule, and it goes in detail and lots of detail about women facing violence and all these different things, even though, yes, we don't necessarily deny that many women are facing violence. But it acts as a very attractive tool, a very attractive rhetoric for many that don't really go back to the source of that philosophy and only look on the shallow or on the surface or on the outside coating of such a philosophy by looking at the narrative and not necessarily where it's coming from. This is actually very dangerous, and we could see many when they would see a hijabi probably going into a march with a feminist march, etc. Well, then we go clapping and we would invite her to the talks, and she becomes this spokesperson to speak with power, and then we would be the ones to actually get, quote unquote, inspired by her, not realizing that not because somebody is standing behind a microphone and is speaking in power, but using an umbrella that is actually feeding on, let me call it, khanzir, pork, haram. It's all, calling it halal does not make the plate halal. We all know that. But unfortunately, the Muslim community many times is so concerned about only food and not the food for thought. So they would be concerned about, let me look at the ingredients, but rarely do they look at the ingredients on where those thoughts are coming from. They would look at the ingredients, monoindiglycerides, gelatin, glycerin, etc. But then when it comes to the thoughts, they would usually just look at the label on the outside. Looks very catchy, doesn't it? And that's what many will fall into. Most psychology, liberal arts, anthropology, sociology, and different studies in humanities, they would actually promote such philosophies, and unfortunately, many times it is presented as if it is based on empirical studies, and that is what science actually proves. And this is the major catch. This is a major catch in where many times they would actually think by enrolling school and that, hey, this is what data is telling us, this is what statistics are telling us, and not realizing that the lobbies have actually wanted to promote their ideas in those fields. Remember, the system is an atheist system. If the system is an atheist system, remember that atheist system is not going to let anyone else take over what goes against it. So it will infiltrate the system. The education system, especially in psychology, liberal arts, anthropology, sociology, and of course all these different areas, is definitely going to be the area to promote the philosophy of atheism. Now, how are liberal ethics promoted? Relativism instead of argument and truth consideration. Emotions and narrative instead of the paradigm and the principle. Existentialism, creating your own purpose to life and creating a principle rather than living a principle. And of course, you would find it many times things speaking about being morally right if a specific society accepts it. And of course, you will find it in things like politics, human rights, and who defines human rights, what defines human rights, and why should we define. And that's why Islam becomes an easy target in class, because of course, especially if your professor is going to be a theology or a philosophy professor or liberal arts professor or psychology professor, they will be finding that, yeah, let's make Islam that easy target to mock when it talks about human rights or when it talks about LGBT, women's issues, abortion, modesty. And of course, it's really sad to actually say that the challenges, and not realizing the challenges and the campaigns that shape their understanding of what makes knowledge is actually making them be victims to that lobbying, to that indoctrination. And of course, media on the outside of college campuses acts as the entertainment piece that teaches how to implement those philosophies in real life. Now you have all the different let's say, pillars in creating your identity are now there. First of all, the educational system, the political system that is backing up the educational system, and the social system, which you would learn from psychology departments, and of course liberal arts departments, and of course philosophy departments, and of course entertainment acts as this piece that makes it that subliminal piece together, and together those different pieces all put together and create this identity. Now, many times, and let me use this one, and where in understanding what acts as the identity challenge for the Muslim community is really this piece, in where a lot of it, empirical evidence, not only affects science, but many don't realize that such evidence in humanities is presented as science and what studies support, not realizing that there are philosophies that motivate how we read and interpret data. The common challenges: number one, trying to impress others, trying to impress of course, there's that part, if you can't beat them, join them, that actually acts as this area that I would say that is taking over our behavior. So we want to impress, and of course, when you're in your early 20s, you want to fit in. So trying to fit in order to create friends, because as human beings, we can't live isolated. We need to find friendships, and usually girls, they're more social than boys. They usually want to fit in more. They usually want to feel accepted more. They want to be the focus more, and we can see that always in where they don't want to feel different, so they always fall within that rhetoric. We're all the same. So don't create differences, and don't talk about this is wrong and this is right. At the end of the day, it's just your opinion and my opinion, and that's what relativism teaches. And in the end, getting absorbed by the political correctness. And of course, what does the political correctness actually, where does it come from? It actually comes from, well, you can't consider something right and wrong, so you just always have to be mindful. Here's the word that most of the times it's being used. You have to be mindful of people's perspectives regarding different things on ethics, so you have to make sure that you use inclusive terms, quote unquote. This is what the word, that is the word that is being used, inclusive terms, tolerant, etc. Now, if you dare say, well, this is right and this is wrong on the spot, you will be accused of lacking tolerance. You will be accused of not being inclusive. You will be accused of disrespectful. And I remember one time I was actually invited, unfortunately, the MSA, this is what they invited me to talk about, but I did, despite it was marriage in Islam. So here I am in front of almost 300 people right in front of me, and here I am, and I begin to, just the definition. I start with the definition that marriage in Islam is a relationship between male and female. Right from amongst the crowd, a man yells out and starts yelling, we are sick and tired of people spreading hate. I didn't even begin my lecture, and here it is. Somebody trying to, from the very beginning, scare me from even saying just the definition of what marriage in Islam is. Now, guess what? It's not just me as a guest speaker, but that is also the case when many times I was even bullied, even as a chaplain at St. Catherine University, bullied even when I wanted to stand up many times against certain faculty to say, well, wait a minute, if your specialty is in theology or philosophy, then make sure you stick to that specialty and don't cross the boundaries in speaking about Islam. Many times the Muslim students in classrooms are actually used as a scapegoat or as a target in order to prove that Islam doesn't have any answers. So what does the student sit and do? They basically want to answer the questions because they feel that they're being cornered and that they have to answer the questions. But at many times, the questions are very challenging questions. And of course, this student just finished high school, or at least 2 years ago finished high school, and was not really and in fact didn't even have an Islamic studies degree. So to expect her to answer questions that are very challenging to her is definitely beyond her scope. So what does the student later on find herself into? Well, she finds herself that I can't answer those questions. Those questions, I guess, don't have answers. And then she finds herself not only with one question, but with a series of different questions that she didn't have the time to actually research or even have the time to educate herself on. And then she finds herself feeling that I don't have answers, therefore Islam doesn't have answers, therefore Islam is wrong. And then she gets absorbed with a system, and then of course that professor uses another system or another I would say psychological war. This is exactly what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it as it is, and I'm not going to use political correctness, but we'll use another type of political psychological war in where it will be the method of trying to condescend the person in front of you. What does the condescending look like? Well, the condescending in where mockery, not necessarily you in person, but mocking the religion, mocking different things, mocking whatever the media probably portrays about the religion. Maybe the Taliban, maybe the different things relating to Islam. And of course you find yourself that no, that's not what Islam teaches. But then you are not really sure what it really teaches, and then you becomes like, I'm confused about this. And of course the system and the method of belittling, condescending is many times one of the most effective ways of actually making the student lose their confidence in the religion. Why do they lose their confidence? Well, because the person that is condescending is actually speaking in complete pride, is acting as the bully. But of course, because he's the faculty, I cannot call him the bully because he might retaliate in my grades. So I stay quiet and I can't answer, and I find myself then losing the confidence gradually until by the 4th year I have lost it all. Well, the other sad part is that da'iyas at times are also in fear of rejection and then put their dunya over akhirah. And we're not clear about Islam and what Islam really says. And certainly, of course, even and certainly on matters that are considered the main and I would say the prime issues, the matters that are right now considered the most important matters on the media, whether that's LGBT, women's rights, human rights, all those different things. And of course, many da'iyas are choosing to give gray answers in order to seem tolerant, to seem somehow inclusive, and to bring about a listening ear instead of actually being clear on what is haqq and what is batil. Now the other I would say challenging part is when we find some of those ideas, or some of those that adhere to those ideas, are actually the ones to be the least to have Islamophobia. And then many Muslims will feel that, well, they're the ones that are accepting me, so I should accept them in return. And this becomes the fitna that da'iyas and the lay Muslims are actually falling into. Well, they're the ones that are supporting Palestine. Should I not also support them for supporting Palestine? Don't give up on your identity because of political gain. And that's why beware of integration, and you don't have to necessarily integrate and put yourself and delude yourself with everything within that community. Don't delude your Muslim identity. Don't water down your Muslim identity. So what should I do? Find pious Muslims to associate with. If you couldn't find them, create your own space. Advocate for your rights on campus. Rights include the right to have a religious practice respected and have the right to find spaces for your prayer and your wudu. Within lectures, you have the right to have faculty respect your faith and not speak about it in any condescending manner. Remember, if you don't stand up for it, somebody else is going to face it. You have to be strong. If you feel that you've been disrespected, complain and advocate, and don't stay quiet in fear of your grades. Complain to the head of the department, complain to the dean, complain to the provost, complain to the president. Create a body of students who will support and pressure the university to respect your rights. Why is creating an MSA important? Because by creating an MSA, the university will actually see you as a coalition and a body that needs to have their rights respected. Now, when you may not see the MSA doing what you wish that they would do, you don't necessarily have to go against them, but be part of it and pressure to make the change go in a positive direction. So see your university and see what is required to have a Muslim student body and creating that board. And if you can't find the right group, you be the leader you wish to find. Again, I'm going to say that one again. If you can't find the right group, if you can't find the right body of Muslims, you be the leader to create that body. Start with making the activity that represents your identity. By pressuring that this is what you are, you will then make that as a fact on ground. Educate yourself on Islam and take activism to educate others. Now, here's the thing. If you actually don't take that, if you don't educate others about your Islam, then you will find yourself becoming a subject of others' indoctrination without you realizing. If you feel the fitna is too strong, remember your akhirah is your priority. You know what? If you feel the fitna is too strong, change your specialty if you have to. If changing the specialty is still not making a difference and your akhirah is in danger, you know what? Drop out and change the school. Change the school if you have to, because your akhirah is more important. Common problems with the MSA. These are sad things that we have to actually admit. Number one, intermingling. Very common thing, but that's actually, I would say the side thing with the intermingling, you would say boys and girls, and actually intermingling if they're not even Muslim. In fact, holding even dances. You're wondering, dances? Yes, dances. Confused about what priorities are in speaking about Islam, in where this is a common thing with the MSA. They're confused about what is the priority, not realizing that they're actually supposed to be leaders on campus. But many times, it doesn't mean that there aren't any leaders on campus. I must admit, I have seen great leaders on campus that I was really impressed by. But it doesn't mean that this is everyone, but this is talking about the majority are confused about the priorities in what they should speak about in Islam. Or many are confused about the different misconceptions and who to even bring as a speaker, or who to even, and what kind of activity to make in order to educate the Muslims on campus. What kind of activity should we be doing? Who should we invite? And many times, that confusion, you could see it infiltrating within the Muslim body on campus. And of course, considering integrating as a priority often is very common, in where let's blend in with the rest of the society. And of course, not considering standing up to what Islam really is. And of course, getting lost between the Muslim community versus Islam, living a liberal practice. Hold on, what's going on here? Living a liberal practice with a Muslim name or a Muslim coding is very common. Now, the Muslim community is living in fear of not being different. Stop right here. What does that mean? Everyone, and unfortunately, most Muslim activists are always trying to prove that we are as American, as Western, as liberal as any liberal can be, as any American can be, and we're the same exact thing. Well, this is actually dangerous to always believe or to even always teach, because at the end of the day, if a Muslim is going to feel that I am just like everyone else, and then eventually letting all the identity start going away, and then I'm not talking about being Muslim, therefore I'm different, but I'm talking about I am like everyone else. You have to be strong and confident. It's okay to say, as Muslims, we are different. Don't fear of being different. You don't have to prove like you're everyone else. You have your identity, you have your distinguished identity, you have your vision in life, you have the understanding of ethics that you go back to. You actually have your own reference in life. So leave it at that. You don't have to feel that I have to prove to everyone that I am as everyone else. And unfortunately, when we look at that, we could see some of the different variants, and where in Deen, it's always trying to prove that it's just a personal issue. And of course, with the nafs, it's promoting the idea that it's your body and you have the right to control it, and usually it's feeding pleasures. And of course, with the influence of atheism, we're seeing that Islam, we're seeing da'iyas, even people writing on blogs and different things, that Islam is all about freedom of thought. In other words, it's actually what the narrative that in postmodernism, what they always wanted to promote about postmodernism. But what we're seeing right now is Muslims actually using the same exact narrative that postmodernists / atheists are trying to promote their understanding of atheism, their understanding of life. Muslims are trying to use the same exact rhetoric, applying it on Islam and saying, hey, Islam actually teaches the same. And not realizing that, wait a minute, not necessarily so. And of course, Islam is all about spreading truth and not necessarily freedom of thought. It doesn't mean that it imposes Islam or we impose Islam on people, but it's all about spreading truth without forcing others to embrace it. And it still insists that all other ideas are wrong, even if they may contain some truth. And in family, the claim that family is mainly based on culture, and culture is nothing but a backward lifestyle that really we as man had realized with civilization that it is all based on personal perspective and political pressures, and therefore it contains no truth, and therefore you should have now reached a level to realize that religion, culture, is nothing but a man creating their own God. That's exactly the impression, and that's exactly the pressure that many are actually living in without them actually realizing where it's actually coming from. Same thing when we're talking about chastity. Now we're seeing even da'iyas, unfortunately, actually claiming that Islam supports people when their sexual quote-unquote orientation, even though in Islam it's actually not an orientation, because an orientation is based on the idea that is relativism, in where you can't consider something right and wrong, but it is actually an aberration. And people, of course, unfortunately, we're right now seeing da'iyas promote that people are free to practice what they wish. Now, here's the thing, is that the political pressure that is surrounding us is actually making Muslims, and many Muslims, feel the pressure that they have to say, we are not any different. Even Islam says that you have to actually practice what you want and what you feel. And that's why you could see even Muslims we're not realizing, for example, that even the Western, or let me call it right now, the stereotypical images against Islam are really just trying to be against Islam in all the different details. And Taliban happens to be the scapegoat. Why? Because, hey, we've worked on Taliban for a long time to make them seem as if they were the most and the biggest danger on humanity. So now the best thing to do, let's not talk about Islam directly, but let's talk about Islam by using Taliban as the figure, as the image. So you would see Muslims, La ilaha illallah, you would see many times Muslims actually falling into this I would say this rhetoric without them realizing and thinking that I'm actually supporting Islam by actually saying that Islam does not support niqab or Islam does not support hijab, and that this is nothing but a Taliban extremism and nothing related to Islam. And of course, many Muslims tend to be the ones to actually speak and become the microphone for such rhetorics. How to build a strong Muslim identity? First, learn Islam. That's the first thing. Don't be afraid to be different. Say La ilaha illallah with all your pride. Say it with your loud voice. I'm not saying scream it out. I'm actually saying it. Actions speak louder than words. Take the effort to take classes with different institutions. We've got Gems of Light right here. We've got Maghrib Institute, Mishkah, and of course there are many others. Jannah Institute, you've got many others. The least you can do is always at least take 2 to 3 classes on Islamic studies. Connect yourself with the Salihin, not the Munafiqeen or those that are on the edge of Islam, and of course Muslims lost in identity. Be active or you will be someone else's subject. Create your group of dhikr. I'm not talking about here telling me now, okay, now we're going to innovations. A group of dhikr can be a group to memorize Quran, can be a group to study Islam. Those are also called groups of dhikr. If you can't find someone, reach out to other salihin outside campus. Understanding the system builds in you the confidence. And of course, when you understand the system, not only will it build in you with the confidence, but it will build in you the knowledge of how to face it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِيَّتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسُ وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّن رَّبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. They follow الظَّنّ, speculation. إِيَّتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ, or they would follow their whims and desires, and their Lord Almighty had sent them guidance and al-wahi. And that brings in the 3 types of knowledge. When you look at speculation, a lot of times as empirical evidence, when you look at the whims, it's basically the lobbying that's trying to promote those thoughts, trying to promote those practices and those pleasures. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you, and He had sent you the wahi to help you know how to think and to help you know what to do and act in. And jazakumullah khairan. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those questions. So go ahead. I would be, let me see. So if you need to unmute yourselves, now you can, I guess, raise your hand just so that we won't have these different voices actually coming in at the same time. So raise your hand if you would like to ask a question, and then you can unmute yourselves, inshallah. Or if somebody put their questions in the chat. Okay, that's it. All right. Was I that clear that no one has? Did I not allow you guys to raise your hands? Is that what the problem is? Let me make the. Was it Selma here? So she said she made me the host. So I guess now I can make her the host back again after taking away her rights. Here we go. So let's make her host. Where is she? There we go. So Selma, I'm making you the host back again. Okay, here we go. Selma, you're the leader again. Sorry for taking away your right. Go ahead.
Jazakallah khairan. The lecture was very clear, alhamdulillah. I personally have no questions. But sisters, if you're able to send in your questions in the chat, feel free to do so, inshallah.
And even the people on Facebook, we got some people on Facebook as well. If you would like to ask any questions, go ahead. Yeah, no Zoom link. Sorry, everyone. Wa alaikum salam.
Okay, you say that we should be we should not be afraid of being different from everyone else, and also so and then like, isn't that okay if everyone because there's so many beliefs that's going on, and if everyone like just believes whatever they believe, because even if you preach to there's nothing you can do about them actually. And I don't think we need to preach, but we need to like just amar bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar. We just do our part of what we can. So if everyone is doing whatever they want, does that mean we're not gonna allow them to do what they want?
So I'm not here saying, stop them in where you're putting in force. We're actually in a stage of clarifying Islam, of speaking out what Islam really is. We're not here asking you to put any force, any type of force or any power other than the power to educate. That's the only thing that we're actually saying. Use the power to educate, and you can't use the power to educate if you yourself are actually lacking the confidence that the education that you hold is actually the right education. You understand what I'm saying? If the person that is educating is not confident about what they're actually educating on, then that person can't educate. That person is themselves in skepticism.
We have a question in the chat. Someone asked, how can I answer when someone asks me what I think of homosexuality in the middle of class?
Be straightforward. Islam considers that God Almighty created man and woman to reproduce and make family. Islam considered that family is very sacred, and in fact, preserving the rights for a child actually starts before even making the child, because family is so sacred. The Lord Almighty had regarded that the natural way of making family, man and woman, is the only permissible way in order to create family, and is the only permissible way to engage in any sexual act, and considered that any other act, whether that was outside of marriage, in other words, whether it was a female or a male, in other words, outside of marriage, whether it was a male with a female or a female with a male outside of marriage, is actually against Islam and against the foundation of humanity and the foundation of family. And whether that was with a man and a woman and a woman is also against Islam. So Islam considers that family is so sacred that any form of sexual relations outside of a family/marriage bond between man and a woman is actually against the nature that the Lord Almighty had created, and against the foundation of humanity. Simple and straightforward. يزعل اللي يزعل. So here's another one. How do you join in groups like MSA when free mixing is practiced? How can we make sure we don't allow modern feminism to infiltrate our belief? I did actually have a whole lecture on feminism, so go back to that one. That's a whole different topic to discuss. How to engage in the MSA with free mixing. Free mixing, you just need to know the different rulings and with the different regulations. Let's be more specific. The different regulations on dealing with men. So make sure you lower your gaze. Make sure you maintain the hijab. Make sure you maintain the adab. So please, if you're talking to men because you needed to talk to men, maybe to organize an event or etc., you don't have to speak with all the dala and all this type of language in where you're trying to attract, or you're not even speak in a serious manner. Speak in respect and speak with the adab. You don't have to speak when you're trying to keep on, you can't even stand up. Speak in a complete standing motion. You don't have to keep on bending and keep on going too flowy. And be confident. Speak in adab. Speak in akhlaq. Remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually tells the women, وَقُلْنَا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا, and say what is good in a good manner. And the end, he also said, what is the ayah? ولا تخضعن بالقول فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض. Stay away from الخضوع بالقول. الخضوع بالقول is a form of trying to be lenient with your voice, be lenient in the action that you carry. Be strong, have the adab, and speak in akhlaq. And at the same time, lower your gaze, maintain your hijab, and only speak with the guys when there is a need. not where it's not a chatting conversation. If it's a chatting conversation, you're definitely doing that intermingling that is not necessary in Islam. Here's another one. Oops. Also, with people wanting you to use their pronouns that is not their actual sex, what should you say? You say it's against my religion. Simple as that. It's against my religion to actually speak in things that are not really the reality of what they are. And that is it. I'm sorry, but this is against my religion. It's against my religion to name the things other than what they really are. Simple as that. Yes, you will find a backlash and you're trying to be homophobe and people crying at you and etc. I'm sorry, you want me to respect your religion? Why don't you respect mine? You want me to respect your practice? Respect my practice. Ya Allah. All right. So I hope I answered that one. And let me see the last question, please. Also, with people wanting you to use that, we mentioned that one. I have 2 years left until I become a teacher in Sweden. In here, in the curriculum, we need to teach about, you mean the LGBTQ, not HBTQ. What should I do? Because I know it's against my religion. Create a body. I'm not sure how Sweden goes, but create a body that will maintain and make sure that you also have the rights to actually say, well, this is not something that I can teach about. This is against my religion. I don't know what political groups you actually have in order to make sure that you have this power to speak about your identity. So you would have to reach out to I guess the political activists in Sweden and even see what ways that you can actually speak up and create the body. Or I'm not sure exactly how the political system goes in Sweden. So I'm definitely the wrong person to speak about this in Sweden. But generally speaking, creating a body and creating a body that acts as a force to preserve your identity is usually the place to start wherever you are and throughout any time of history. جزاكم الله خيرا everyone, and السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, and بارك الله فيكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.